You've heard the hype.
Don't believe the hype.
Arizona is the new urbanist dream, right? Wrong. For every Tempe, cul-de-sac, car-free paradise, there's at least 3 urban nightmares sprawled across the entire state. Cities like Phoenix and Scottsdale are designed for the car. Phoenix is known as just one giant car-dependent suburb. There are miles and miles of asphalt and infrastructure made for this car. This type of design and car dependency basically minimizes pedestrian activity and contributes to the urban sprawl. The metropolitan area of Phoenix has one of the largest freeway systems in the nation. There was a 2005 study, obviously this is way behind what I found, 1,400 miles. That's got to be approaching 2,000 or even more to current time, because we're talking about what's the math on that? I mean, more than 20 years. It's 20 years. So, and if you're not Tempe, right? Tempe has that cul-de-sac, the car-free neighborhood, right? That is one isolated event. You're not that, right? If you happen to not have a car, you're going to be jumping in an Uber and Lyft. So everyone has one, probably 2 cars, right? And if they just happen to not have that car, they're going to be jumping in the Lyft. So all the Lyfts, all the Ubers are on the highway. All the suburban vans are on the highway. So with no infrastructure, which we're going to be talking about next, that lack of infrastructure, cars are just going to continue to expand, and all the money devoted, it will be going to capital improvements for the roads, where they should be really going for transit. Living on an island sounds really great, right? But that's kind of in a short-term plan. You don't want to be permanently on an island.
Because I hate this goddamn island.
And that's how it feels with that lack of transit infrastructure, right? That is both train and bus. I mean, there is bus systems, right? But really a more networked bus working in concert with each other, both bus and rail. You have to rely on the car, except for Tempe. So I mentioned Tempe in the beginning, the cul-de-sac. You're basically on that island. So you have all the creature comforts there. You don't need the car, but then if you want to, of course, you're going to want to leave that area. You can't, like in Chicago, you can jump on the train. I've always, when I was, even now, but in my 20s and 30s, that's what I would do. If I wanted to go to the downtown area of Chicago and visit, for example, River North, there's a lot of clubs and bars, I would take 2 trains, no problem at all. 30 minutes, I'm there, right? Of course, that is 80, 90 years of infrastructure in place. Like many fast emerging cities all throughout the Arizona area, you already have the cars there, and rail is something that gets pushed down the road. And now you're in a situation where you've already built up all that car infrastructure. You're just going to continue to add capital dollars, where someone in the legislative in Arizona has got to have some cojones, for lack of a better term, and leadership to steer those capital dollars from the roads to rail. It's just not going to happen. So you're going to have this island of car-free living and in Tempe, but everything surrounding is going to require the car. Gilbert, which is a fast-growing, really, really popular for families, for jobs. It's just a lightning quick ascent. On all the top 10, and particularly with Wallet Hub, top 10, top 20 lists to move to. Great, right? But you're living in those suburbs, those subdivisions. There is no infrastructure in place, so of course everyone jumps in the car. It's very rare that someone won't have a car, probably 2, if not more, 3 or 4. You got a family of like 4 or 5. You got Junior and Jane and Jim Doe. The kids, they're each going to want to have their cars. So most families have 3 and 4 cars, right? No infrastructure, so there's no sustainability. So where's the urbanism there? And it's those popular cities, right? People are moving outside of Phoenix and Tempe. Those are some decent models, right, folks, for urbanism, relative urbanism. But people are moving into Chandler. They're moving into Gilbert, Paradise Valley, right? So, all these really up-and-coming cities, no urban infrastructure, everyone's jumping in the car. So that's something that eventually, again, the leadership are going to have to address, transferring the money from the asphalt to some type of light rail. The political will, right?
politics.
Huh? Politics?
So, you have car dependency, you have the lack of infrastructure, right? There are stuff that needs to be some hurdles, roadblocks, for lack of a better term. I've used that term a lot. A lot of roadblocks, right? So you have the car dependency, you have the lack of infrastructure, right? But you need to have that will. And that's will from the politicians and also from the residents, right? So, Scottsdale has tried. And I want to be very clear, and I've mentioned this, right? Probably a lot of my videos are going to be dominant with that missing middle housing. We're not talking about just throwing everything against the wall, S on the wall, and you got to take it or else. This is incremental, folks. Everything. Baby steps, incorporating more townhomes, incorporating more duplexes, triplexes, right? Having that diversity in the housing stock to add supply, which everyone's goal is to try to bring these housing prices down. But, right, you have the political. The politicians are going to listen to their residents. They want to keep their jobs. And a lot of residents, NIMBYism, right?
NIMBY. Angelinos don't want them in their backyards.
Not in my effing backyard, right? I added the effing part. I hope you realize that. They want to protect their home values. They love the single families with the big yards. And oh, by the way, those big yards, they want grass. Arizona, do they got water? You have the semiconductor business coming in, right, outside of Phoenix, which is great, bringing in jobs, but that's going to consume a lot of water. So it's like, and that's what they're fighting. So you have NIMBYism on one hand, you have the political will and the politicians, right? You have ordinances, you have barriers. I've talked about development fees. Developers would make some middle and missing housing like townhomes, but of course, there are lot rules as far as the setback, how much in the frontage. All those rules need to be dismantled. And there's a case here, Axon wanted some multi-family housing that the city ferociously fought. And they basically threatened to pull the employer. So now we're talking about jobs. This is where it gets, it's like, oh, people got to step back. There are going to be more cases like that, right? Chandler, Arizona had affordable housing, some density housing, missing middle housing outside of the airport of all places, right? I mean, nothing wrong with living. I don't think a lot of people would want to with all the noise traffic, but it's out over there. Why would people fight that? People are living in their protected subdivisions and, suburban sprawl, and they're trying to fight something over in the municipal airport. They're fighting that. I mean, come on. So we as urbanists have to have these kind of micro wins. It's micro wins for incremental density, but they're just being that pushback from this NIMBYism and from politicians. Now, of course, there are natural forces that just may not make it make sense for urbanism in Arizona, right? So this is not just a human issue, a human cause, where there's this lack of urbanism, and then therefore urbanism relocation is over. Of course, you have the natural elements, right? You have the extreme heat. So, of course, with walking and biking, which is the other two of the trifecta of urbanism, that's kind of difficult for the majority of the year. Of course, you're talking December, January, not a problem at all. But even then, temperature reaches easily in the high 90s. And in the summer, forget it. So there's going to be those natural challenges of what to do, right? So that may make, you can't have cooling centers everywhere. There's, of course, lack of water. So you don't want to have a big trail, then have water sprinklers, water fountains, all out there where there's water issues and shortages. So that's always going to be the challenge. So ultimately, it may not make sense. However, that light rail is something just to alleviate a lot of the congestion. I think a lot of residents would appreciate that. That's where that focus can be. So if you can't really have a lot of the walking and not from people are going to bike, maybe instead of creating those bike paths, and I'm just spitballing here, right? Kind of thinking out loud. And in the comments, folks, let me know. Particularly residents who are there in Arizona, in the Phoenix, Tempe, Chandler area. Maybe not have the bike path, but just focus all those dollars to having the light rail similar to what they already have in Tempe, which Tempe and Phoenix have a point A to B connection. Slowly 10 to 15 years to connect to the Chandlers and the Paradise Valleys, right? Creek, and Surprise, Arizona, focus on that for that light rail instead of the other two. Maybe that's going to be the solution. The reality is clear, folks. If you are a professional and, of course, going to Arizona for all those jobs, and those jobs are not going to stop, it is going to be a wonderful place to have a high-paying job. You, as that urbanist, are going to have to do a pros and cons. And if the cons of not having that great urbanism, not having the rail for quite some time, like I'm saying, I'm hopeful. It doesn't sound like it's going to happen anytime soon, any type of expansion, right, of the infrastructure. It's going to be very, very hot to walk, and you can bike and walk definitely and get exercise, but it's going to be limited because of the heat. You're going to have to decide if you're going to drive that car. You're going to have to probably get a car regardless, unless you're living in Tempe, in that one isolated area. And again, you still got to travel. You may not have your work in Tempe. You, the professional, have to make that decision. So if Arizona is not your cup of tea, please reach out. I have other cities. I'm doing videos every week on other cities that have the great urbanism where you can get a great job and have great urbanism. Please reach out. Can't wait to see you in the next video.